Moving on now, joining us live is also G. Parthasarathy, former diplomat from New Delhi. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Now, my first question to you, how do you assess India's position in the Quad, especially in the backdrop of the war in Ukraine, where India's stance has been to encourage and call for dialogue? Now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as we mentioned, is in Japan for a two-day visit. The focus of the Tokyo visit is primarily the quadrilateral security dialogue, that is the Quad summit. Other than that, the Indian leader will also be attending a host of other events. He also had a meeting with business community in Japan. The Indian Prime Minister arrived in Tokyo's Haneda airport today, where he was received by the Indian diaspora. Once again, we're now being joined by G. Parthasarathy. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you can hear me now. How do you assess India's... All right, thank you, sir. My first question to you is, how do you assess India's position in the Quad, especially in the backdrop of the war in Ukraine, where India's stance has been to encourage and call for dialogue and diplomacy?
Look, this whole business of Ukraine is completely out of the schedule of the Quad. The Quad is for the Indo-Pacific, meaning across the Indian and Pacific Oceans. We are not going to, spend all our energy discussing Ukraine. Yes, it should be discussed, and it will be discussed. Our position is very clear, and we would like to see the Russians and the Ukrainians get together. After all, they've lived together for centuries, and sort out their problems. And the more external interference take place, the more rigid the Russians become. I've lived in Russia for quite a few years, and they can become very rigid if they feel they're being pushed. So I think what I see is the Quad is a very positive organization. The Quad is an organization whose charter is very clearly defined, whose role is defined, and India is playing a crucial role. Because, let me say this, the main threat which Quad addresses is the threat which countries across the region face from China. Right. Now, whether it is Indonesia or Vietnam or Philippines or anyone else, they have all experienced Chinese aggression on the seas and on land. So China is a factor which makes them fear for all. Now, what the Quad does is create an environment that we are all together and we will do the needful. For example, India recently has agreed to provide Philippines with missiles, anti-ship missiles, which it can use very hard against the Chinese. And those anti-ship missiles are made with Russian and Indian collaboration. Right. So the world is a much more complicated place. President Biden has a long-term fixation with the Russians, but the Quad is Indo-Pacific. Right. It is not.
Absolutely, sir. Now, on that note, what are the big expectations from the Quad? What sort of a plan of action can we see in countering China's growing assertion, like you mentioned?
Look, I think there have been a series of discussions on this. And the problem really is that China has exploited differences within its entire Asia-Pacific neighborhood. In the subcontinent, it does it between India and Pakistan. Elsewhere, it plays off one against the other. Their rivalry in East Asia is very, very old and well known, and it plays off. And China has therefore got itself a major position, especially on the economic side. And the problem with the East Asians is they've signed a free trade agreement with them and are paying for it. So China, our effort is to say, spread this out and spread out our cooperation with these countries. I think the Americans are coming through with some new proposals. Their Jake Sullivan, their national security advisor, really spelt it out when he said what we should focus on is supply chains, digital economy, clear energy, investments and infrastructure. Now that sets the basis for how we will all work together. And it's not just a military alliance, it is by increasing economic interdependence. And the important fact I stress always is, don't forget one factor culturally which links India to Southeast Asia is Buddhism. The largest population of Buddhists is in this region. So I think there is much we can do. We can do, and Prime Minister Modi is following through. I know both the External Affairs Minister and the National Security Advisor are doing likewise. So the aim is to put together people who are confident enough to challenge China. You know, the Americans recently had a ASEAN summit in Washington, and it came out with zero because so many people were too scared to speak about China, even in the United States. So you are dealing with a difficult problem. The idea, as I said, is to bring people together. And what we are doing by way of infrastructure, what we are doing by way of digital economy, is to bring people, all of us together, so that their over-dependence on China ends.
Right.
China starts by being the good boy, and then you buy so much, you get into a debt trap, as Sri Lanka has done, as many others have done, and they land in trouble economically, because then China starts taking over territory.
Right.
So I think these are the political things we have to make with friendly countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and others, and the Quad should do it.
Right. All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us with your analysis of this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.